The courtroom falls silent. Judith Brenner's flawlessly manicured hands tremble as she takes the witness stand. Her designer suit no longer sits perfectly. For the first time in her career, she is unprepared. Ms. Brenner, do you recognize this document? The lawyer holds up a piece of paper, a denial letter with her signature. Above it, in childish handwriting, an awkward marker line. Judith's voice fails her. The judge has to prompt her twice to respond. He thought it was an autograph. She finally whispers. 3 months earlier, there was a quiet tension on certain office floors. In the IT department, technicians frowned at their monitors. In the conference room, the light from a slideshow reflected in the glasses of the 8 board members seated around the polished mahogany table. Judith stood, her custom-tailored suit like armor in charcoal wool. First quarter savings, total $23 million. Her voice filled the room with crisp precision. A graph on the screen showed a steep upward line. That exceeds our forecast by 17%. As she presented the figures, she felt a familiar, sharp pain in her left wrist. She ignored it, as she had for years. The autoimmune disease was her best-kept secret. Only her doctor and 2 trusted staff members in the authorization department knew. The night before, she'd had that dream again. A blue-faced child gasping for air while she stood by, helpless. She had woken up drenched in sweat, the taste of panic in her mouth. The nightmares were becoming more frequent. A younger executive, Peterson, if she remembered correctly, cleared his throat and raised his hand timidly. These savings, they cut medications for thousands of patients. Do we have data on the medical impact? Judith looked at him over the rim of her designer glasses. The alternative treatment plans are sufficient. We can't run on feelings, Mr. Peterson. This is a business. Her fingertips trembled slightly as she finished the presentation. She reached for her water glass a bit more forcefully than necessary. Board member Whitaker nodded approvingly. Impressive work, Judith. The stock will love this. As the others gathered their documents, Judith noticed Whitaker watching her with an oddly probing gaze. She suppressed a sudden unease and left the room with her usual poised stride. Back in her office, an email from IT was waiting. Urgent. Indications of unauthorized access to secure patient data. Judith deleted it with a single keystroke. IT always overreacted. She had more important things to do. Looking up, she noticed her assistant whispering intensely with a colleague from legal. They fell silent as soon as Judith glanced over. The assistant scurried back to her desk. Odd. The next morning brought another IT alert in her inbox. Security anomaly detected. Unusual login patterns in executive accounts. Again, she deleted it without reading further. These tech people saw threats everywhere. Looking up, she noticed her assistant whispering intensely with a colleague from legal. They fell silent as soon as Judith glanced over. The assistant scurried back to her desk. Odd. Her assistant knocked on the open door. Ms. Brenner, your 2 p.m. appointment is here, a Ms. Foster. Judith frowned. Foster? She's not on my calendar. She's been trying to get an appointment for 3 weeks, said it was an emergency. Dr. Richards from Pediatrics referred her. Judith sighed. Emergency usually meant someone had failed to follow standard procedure. 5 minutes, no more. The woman who entered her office didn't fit the polished world of Apex Coverage Group. She wore worn-out jeans, a plain t-shirt, and looked like she hadn't slept in days. In her tense hands, she held a thick folder of medical documents. Ms. Brenner, thank you for seeing me. I'm Megan Foster. It's about my son, Mason. Judith checked her watch. How can I help you, Ms. Foster? Mason has a rare form of epilepsy. His neurologist prescribed a specialized anticonvulsant, but Apex Coverage denied coverage. The alternative you suggest doesn't work. His seizures are getting worse. Judith mechanically flipped through the documents. The case was clear. The prescribed medication had been removed from the approved list after the most recent policy update. Her policy update. Ms. Foster, I understand your concern, but we cannot approve every costly treatment. There's scientific evidence that the alternative is effective in most patients. Most patients, but not Mason. Megan's voice shook. Last week, he had 3 seizures in one day. The school bus won't take him anymore. I can't work because I have to stay with him. Judith thought of the small blue pill she'd taken that morning, an unlisted biopharmaceutical from Sweden, keeping her own autoimmune condition at bay, approved through a special access code she had created herself. A flicker of discomfort rose in her, but she pushed it aside. Your son's condition is tragic, but policies are not personal, Ms. Foster. They're designed to sustain the system for everyone. The woman stared at her in disbelief. He's 7 years old. I encourage you to explore more alternatives with your doctor. My assistant will show you out. When the door closed, silence returned to Judith's office. Only the soft hum of the air purifier remained. She opened the top drawer of her desk and took out a small pill case. The tablet tasted bitter. 3 weeks later, Megan Foster unlocked the bathroom door and froze. Mason was lying on the cold tile floor, his body rigid, foam at his mouth. His small limbs jerked uncontrollably, his eyes rolled back. Mason, sweetheart, I'm here. She knelt beside him, gently turned him on his side like the doctor had shown her. His skin was clammy. It's okay, I'm right here. But this time, the seizure didn't stop. After a minute, his face began turning blue. No! Mason, breathe! Her voice cracked. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911, wedging the phone between her shoulder and ear as she began CPR. 911, what's your emergency? My son! He's not breathing. A seizure. He can't breathe. An eternity later, just seconds, really. Mason gasped for air. His body relaxed and he began to cry. Megan held him, her own tears falling into his hair. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics found a desperate mother and a dazed little boy. One of them immediately understood. Insurance didn't approve it? Megan shook her head. They said the alternative was sufficient. The paramedic exchanged a knowing look with his partner. We're seeing this more and more, especially since the new Apex coverage policy. That night, Megan made a decision. The next morning, she walked into the city hospital's pharmacy. Heart pounding, eyes low, she grabbed a box of the denied medication from an open shelf while the pharmacist was distracted on the phone. She was arrested in the building. The security cameras caught everything. Judith's day began as always. At precisely 6:30 a.m., she moved through her minimalist penthouse on the way to her morning coffee. On the kitchen table sat a printed IT email, critical security breach, immediate response required. She took a sip from her cup. IT always blew things out of proportion. As CEO of a billion-dollar insurance firm, she had other priorities. Her phone rang, a blocked number. She didn't pick up. The voicemail was from a journalist named Vanessa Chen. Ms. Brenner? I'm investigating medical denial cases. I'd like to hear your side before we publish. Judith deleted the message. Another reporter chasing a scandal. Nothing new. But in the office corridors, whispers grew louder. People fell silent as she approached. In IT, a group of technicians huddled in a frantic discussion broke apart when they saw her. At 10:42 a.m., everything changed. She was in a meeting when her phone buzzed. Then again, and again. She finally looked and froze. Dozens of notifications. All from one source, Apex Coverage. Her assistant burst in without knocking, pale-faced. "Miss Brenner, you need to come to your office now." On her monitor, she saw it. A massive data leak. Patient files, internal memos, approval logs, publicly accessible, including her own record, her special access code, her unlisted Swedish medication. Who? How? The leak source remained unknown. An external attack? A whistleblower? The IT director mentioned sophisticated masking techniques, which really meant they had no idea. "Oh God," she whispered. Her assistant quietly placed a newspaper on her desk. The headline screamed, "Apex Coverage. CEO denies medicine to children, takes it herself." The next few days blurred into a nightmare. Reporters mobbed the building. Social media exploded with rage. Photos of Judith photoshopped next to sick children. Judith denies. Killer CEO. Thousands of angry emails. A white rose on her car windshield with a note, "Murderer." She was caricatured as a grim reaper in a business suit. One newspaper dubbed her the woman who let children die. TV anchors called her the Ice Queen of Insurance. Her resume dissected, her past scrutinized. An emergency board meeting was called. Judith didn't sit at the head of the table this time. Conversation stopped when she entered. Seats around her remained empty, as if she were contagious. Whitaker stood, red with restrained anger. 23 million in savings, and now we know how you did it." He slammed his folder on the table. "While kids suffer, you granted yourself special treatment." "That's not," Judith began, but her voice sounded weak even to herself. "It's exactly that," Whitaker shouted. "You deceived all of us. You are our disgrace, Judith." Afterward, he gave a press briefing. "Apex Coverage disavows Ms. Brenner's actions. We're taking action immediately." The social fallout hit fast. A longtime friend canceled dinner. "I hope you understand the circumstances." Her favorite restaurant suddenly had no tables available, even with her standing reservation. That evening, protesters gathered outside her building. "Kids die, Judith thrives." A woman spit at her feet. Someone shoved her. "Murderer!" someone hissed. She fled through the back entrance. The next morning, her usual cafe refused to serve her. The owner approached, apologetic. Customers complained. They said they won't eat anywhere that serves child killers. "I'm sorry, I can't risk the publicity." In her silent apartment, she turned on the news. Every channel showed her face. She turned it off, stood by the window, and stared out into the night. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. After a sleepless night, Judith returned to the office. With steady steps, she walked straight into the insurance department and signed a special authorization for Mason's medication, a personal exception, an attempt to make at least one thing right. 3 days later, the form came back. Further review required. Inconsistency with Policy 27. B. Her own apparatus, her own rules, now worked against her. The bureaucracy she had created was now devouring her attempt to fix a single case. The next morning, her phone rang. Vanessa Chen again. "Come to City Hospital. Pediatrics, 3rd floor. Now." "Why would I?" Mason Foster was admitted. "Severe seizure. You need to see this." Something in Vanessa's voice made Judith obey. When she arrived at the pediatric ward, she could already hear the shouting down the hall. A child screamed. Monitors beeped. Then she saw it. A small boy on a hospital bed, body convulsing violently. Foam at his mouth, eyes rolling. Doctors and nurses worked frantically around him. "Or respiratory arrest," a nurse shouted. "Intubate." Vanessa stood silently next to Judith, not watching the child, but Judith's face. That's Mason Foster. This is what happens when the cheap alternative fails. This is the reality behind your savings. Judith couldn't speak. She watched the doctors fight, the small body twitching, breath halting, then finally resuming. The seizures slowed. The boy began to cry. A woman burst into the room, Megan Foster, paler and thinner than the last time Judith had seen her. She must have come straight from jail or a hearing, accompanied by a guard. When she saw her son, her face crumpled with relief and anguish. "Mason, baby, I'm here. Mommy's here." Judith stepped back, invisible to the mother and child, trapped in a world that suddenly felt too real. The numbers on her slides, the statistics, the cost savings, they had a face now. A small face with tear-streaked cheeks. Vanessa touched her arm. "Come on, there's something else you need to see." The Cooperative Community Pharmacy was located in a rundown part of the city, a modest building where volunteers worked to provide medication for those left behind by the system. Megan Foster volunteered there now, part of her release conditions. When Judith and Vanessa entered, Megan froze. Her eyes narrowed. What is she doing here? Judith stood stiffly in her expensive suit, clearly out of place among the worn shelves and exhausted staff. She reached for a box of medication from the counter. It slipped from her grasp, pills scattering across the linoleum floor. "Miss Foster, Judith knelt awkwardly to pick them up, a humiliating posture for a woman used to signing off on million-dollar budgets. "Save it," Megan cut in. "Your system almost killed my son. Again." "That's not protocol," Judith said weakly, trying to reclaim her tone of authority. Megan let out a bitter laugh. "Neither is watching your child seize on a bathroom floor." She reached under the counter and pulled out a paper. The denial letter for Mason's medication, with Judith's signature at the bottom. Above it, an awkward marker stroke, as if drawn by a child. "He saw your signature and thought it was an autograph. He thought you were someone important. A star." Megan's voice broke. "He collects autographs. He wanted to add yours." Judith stared at the childish mark. The world blurred. That signature, one of thousands she had made without thought, had given a child hope, only to crush it. "I wanted to help," she heard herself say, her voice foreign, "but I couldn't see every individual case. The system you created," Megan said softly, "except for yourself." Something inside Judith shattered. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and for the first time in her career she broke down. Publicly, visibly, completely. She clutched the counter to steady herself. Tears filled her eyes, her makeup ran. A stifled sob escaped her. The perfectly composed CEO of Apex Coverage collapsed before the eyes of a single mother and a journalist. In the days that followed, Judith made decisions her former self would have called madness. She contacted Megan's lawyer. She would testify, for Megan, against the board's orders, against the legal gag order. On the day of the hearing, she hadn't slept. Her normally impeccable suit hung awkwardly. Her hair was poorly styled. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. "Ms. Brenner, will you resign? Is it true the board wants to fire you?" In the courtroom, tension hung in the air. As Judith took the witness stand, a murmur swept the gallery. "Murderer!" someone yelled. "How do you sleep at night?" A crumpled paper cup was thrown in her direction. The judge called for order. Bailiffs secured the area. "Please state your name and position for the record," the judge instructed. Judith Brenner," she began, her voice unsteady. "CEO of Apex Coverage," she faltered, gripping the podium. The judge had to prompt her again. Lawyers whispered. Journalists leaned forward. Vanessa Chen suddenly stood in the audience. "Will you tell the court, Ms. Brenner, How many children like Mason suffered under your decisions while you personally benefited from the system you built? Your signature destroyed lives. The judge called for silence, but the blow had landed. Judith looked as if she had been struck. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. A bailiff handed her water. She drank with shaking hands, spilling half. In a fragile voice, she began, "I'm here to testify that Megan Foster had no choice. The system, my system, failed." The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection. The witness is off topic." "Ms. Brenner," the judge interrupted, "you understand your statement may incriminate you." Judith took a deep breath. "Yes." She looked at Megan. "And I'll continue." What followed was a confession that rocked Apex coverage to its core. Judith detailed her special treatment. She explained how she built a system that erased individual stories while protecting herself. As she spoke, she grew pale, swayed slightly, gripping the stand for support. "When I denied Ms. Foster's request, I didn't see her son. I saw a statistic, a data point, a system I created to shield people like me and exclude people like them." She left the courtroom through a side exit, hounded by shouts and flashing cameras. On her phone, an email from the board. Her resignation was expected. Immediate, irrevocable. Whitaker gave another press briefing. "Ms. Brenner betrayed not only our company, but the basic principles of cost efficiency. Legal action is under review." The next morning, when Judith entered the Apex coverage building to collect her belongings, her access badge had already been deactivated. Security escorted her to her office. Colleagues avoided eye contact as if she were radioactive. With a cardboard box of personal items, she walked out of the building she once commanded. But before leaving, she copied documents. Proof that Mason's case wasn't isolated. Hundreds of similar cases, all denied under her leadership. She gave the files to Vanessa Chen. Megan Foster was acquitted. The charges were dropped. A week later, Judith found a letter in her mailbox, a job offer from the community pharmacy. Not a leadership role, but an advisory position on insurance issues. Included was a photo of Mason with his new medication. Vanessa Chen published a long article titled "The Price of Coverage," documenting Judith's transformation and the systemic failures of the healthcare industry. It sparked a nationwide debate. A month after her testimony, Judith visited Mason at the rehab center. She no longer had a corner office or assistants. In her purse, a copy of her testimony for Mason, not out of pride, but as a promise. Mason, paler than other boys his age but with bright eyes, studied her face carefully. No hug, no trust, just quiet observation. Then, wordlessly, he handed her a drawing, a woman in a suit standing before a judge. "You're the lady who stood up for Mom, right?" he asked. Judith swallowed. "Number, I'm the one who finally listened." Megan stood in the doorway, watching. As Judith left, Megan gave her a small nod. No full forgiveness. No dramatic closure. "That won't help Mason," she said quietly, "but maybe it'll help someone else." It wasn't a perfect ending. No redemption arc, just a beginning, a step in another direction. At a red light on the way home, Judith listened to a radio segment about healthcare reform. She thought of the child's marker across her signature. Of that signature, one among thousands, made without thought. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she had nearly forgotten. Responsibility. The light turned green.